I'm going to show you an exercise that's so simple and effective for restoring internal rotation of the hip, you might just laugh once you see what happens. Many people try to do internal rotation exercises where they're trying to jam themselves into an end range of motion, force a big stretch, a big opening of the hip. But in my opinion, I think most people are better off actually starting off softer and easing themselves into their hips. What we're going to do is we're just going to lay on our side and we're going to be in a 90-90 position with a foam roller in between our thighs. What we're going to be doing is getting the femur right here to very gently roll back within the hip socket as we get that knee ahead of the bottom knee. So it's a very gentle exercise, because if we just try to force ourselves into a position, try to use too much range of motion, and we just end up tensing our body up, we're going to just end up squeezing muscles and tissues around the surface of our joint and the hip itself, and that's going to cause a restriction of the ability for the hip to move back within the socket in the first place. So less tension is better here. Slower is better here. Stay within the means of what you're capable of. Now this needs to be as chill as possible. So support your head like you're taking a nap, and then the other shoulder is just hanging out. It's not dumped forward, it's just in line with the hip right there. And then all you're going to do is very gently exhale through your mouth as you bring that top knee forward. But you're only going to go to the point where you start to feel like your low back is about to move. Don't go to the point where it actually moves. Stop at that point and then come back very gently as you inhale through your nose. Exhale, go further, and then inhale, come back. Super chill, that's all it is. It should be all hip movement pretty much. Now, as a regression, if this is too much hip flexion, you can bring your knees down a little bit lower, and you can do it in this position right here. Same thing applies though, just make sure your low back isn't moving. As a progression, you can get your feet on a wall, making sure that your feet are in line with your knees, which are in line with your hips. And then you'll do the same thing. So exhale out very gently, only go to the point where you feel like your low back is about to move, but don't go beyond that point where it actually moves, and then inhale through your nose very gently and slowly back. Exhale forward very gently, inhale back. This exercise is a key component in my beginner body restoration program, which is designed for anyone to be able to do, and it helps improve hip mobility restrictions and all sorts of different other mobility and postural limitations. Now, if you want something a little bit more aggressive and upgraded, you could do the following exercise, which is more of a dynamic roll with a kettlebell. And the reason why this works is because you're going to be laying on your back and you're going to be rolling your pelvis over your femur. You see what that did right there to the space within my hip? It pushed my femur back within the hip socket. And by doing this dynamically, you can continue to open up space. Just remember to go in a way where you don't have a lot of tension within your body, because if you do, then that's just going to restrict the space you have to move into. For the right person, this works so well that even high-level NBA players like James Harden does it. So we need a kettlebell or a dumbbell if you don't have one, and we're going to hold it in a rack position. On the side, we are not rolling to, so on the opposite side, because we're going to roll to the left here, weight is in the right arm, and the wrist is straight. Now, we are going to take the free hand and reach it above our head, and it should not be so high that the arm is off of the ground. It should be nice and comfortably on the floor throughout this. So you might need to go a little bit lower or higher, but make sure that you're not too low to where it's in the way. Now what we're going to do is pull the same side leg of the arm that's holding the hand back to 90 degrees, right there. And the most important thing in this exercise is that we keep the down leg on the floor, knees locked out, toes are pulled back. And now what we're going to do is we're going to inhale through our nose and roll the hip and the shoulder at the same time. And in this end range position, we have stacked shoulders right here. And this knee and shin is flat on the floor. And then we're going to exhale and roll back. Notice how the kettlebell is staying in more or less the same place. It's not moving that much. We're really just rolling our body around that kettlebell. The most common mistake on this activity is that people will either get tired or use too heavy of a weight, and then when they roll, the hip goes way too early and then the shoulder drags and lags behind it. If that's the case, make sure that you're starting the shoulder potentially earlier than you think you need to. So it is together, not separate. That is much better. The other thing that we see is people will again either get tired or forget about the fact that this down leg needs to stay locked out. The screw home mechanism when the knee extends creates internal rotations. We want to bias that via pushing that leg down, pulling the toes back and keeping it locked out at all times. The other most common mistake in this is that people will not stack their shoulders properly. So as they roll over, this lags behind and then it's going to be back here and it's not going to feel too good, or it's going to be too far forward. And again, you're going to know because it's not going to feel right. You want to be perfectly stacked right here so the shoulders are on top of each other. And that way you're going to create a good amount of force into the ground to help you compress your hip into the floor more and bias more internal rotation. For the foam roller roll, I'd recommend doing it for about 2 minutes, very slow and controlled. For the total body roll with the kettlebell, I'd recommend doing 2 sets of about 10 to 12 reps. If you're still struggling, I'd recommend that you watch this video on what might be the restriction as to why you struggle to improve your internal rotation.